Hey guys, what's up? I get requests all the time about doing videos, how-to videos on how I build my frames and A-arms. That's the two most requested things that I get. So I'm going to start trying to do some of those videos, show you guys how I do some of these things. I apologize, this video is probably going to be kind of shaky. I'm filming it with a cell phone because I'm not at home, can't use my actual camera with a tripod. But I think you'll get the idea. The A-arms I'll do in another video. Just going to cover the frames today. I apologize, I had already built these two side rails before I thought about doing the video. All I'd done for these was to use a cigarette lighter to bend them into the shape I wanted. And I'll show you how I came up with the idea for where I needed to bend it on in just a second. Put you down in the dark for just a second while I do something, and I'll be right back. Okay, so this is how I bend them. I've got the two pieces of stock that I used with a clamp on one end, and I don't have to clamp on the other end, but this is just to illustrate. I've got them square, clamped together. Sometimes I'll even put a dab of glue on one end, dab of glue at the other, maybe a little dab of glue in the center. Not enough to glue it together to where I'll never get them apart, but just to hold them together. That way when you bend your rails, you're bending them both at the same time. You don't have to heat these up a lot with the light or anything. Not so hot that when you touch it's going to burn your finger or anything like that. Styrene becomes pretty flimsy pretty easily, especially when you're using the thickness I'm using. I wish I could tell you the actual thickness of these rails. I believe they are about 40 thousandths by 100 thousandths, but there was just two scrap pieces I had in my box. Get back to that in a second. Show you one other difference in the way I build. This is how I build if I'm going to use thicker material and just make it more square. Let's just say that was the type of frame I was going to build. Just a simple frame with a little kick up in the front because I like everything to get laid out. So I want room to move my A-arms up far enough to be able to lay everything out. See notch in the back, be able to lay it out. Material I'm using, again, I don't know the thickness, just some I had on hand, but that's it. All I've done was took my ruler, kept everything square, drew the bottom lines into the shape I wanted. Then I took this and lined it up along those bottom lines and just traced around everything for the top lines. That way I know it's the size of this piece. Imagine this paper with a piece of thin styrene. I usually use like 20,000 styrene. I'll actually take these pieces and cut them into this shape and lay each piece into the styrene and glue it to the styrene. The reason I do that, I used to just take these pieces, get them square and glue, at the tips, glue them together. That holds okay, but if you do anything a little hard, move it a little too much, it will break. This keeps it from breaking when you get it glued to the other piece. I'm not going to say you won't break it, but you're going to have to struggle with it. It's not going to be real easy to break. So that's the way I do the thicker pieces and the more square frames. I'm not going to build that on camera because the only difference between this and the one I'm going to build is just that's it. I would glue it to the styrene. There is one other difference I would do when I'm mounting these two pieces together. Once I have my two frame rails built and I put these two together, let's just say it was my frame, I will drill through this side into this piece the size of a piece of round styrene rod like this. You don't have to go real deep, but then I'll run the styrene rod into both when I glue it, and it holds it together really well. It won't break. So that's how I do it to keep it from breaking. And if you don't do something in an effort to try to keep it from breaking, you're going to get real frustrated because the frames constantly break. I hope I can do this while holding my cell phone and showing you how I get the tolerances, but I'll try. All I would do to figure out the width of my frame rails that I need is put the tires I'm going to use, which these aren't actually tires I'm going to use, but I am going to be using 23-inch Pegasus. These are 23-inch Pegasus wheels, so it's the same thing. I've already got my measurements, so I'm just trying to give you guys an idea how to do it. Take the ruler, measure in between the wheels, and see how much room you got once you got your tires in place. We're just going to say I have 2.5 inches there. When I build my frames now, of course I can't build the frame 2.5 inches wide. You have to take a few other things into account. You're going to know that you can't go over 2.5 inches, obviously. You're going to have to build a front suspension, or you're going to have to use one off another kit, so you'll need to find out how wide that is. Okay? If you're going to build A-arms, you're going to have to leave room on the side of each one to build it. You're going to need at least 3/8 of an inch. I like to go up closer to 1/2 inch to build my A-arms. So if it was 2.5 inches, I'm going to need 1/2 inch on both sides for A-arms. I know I've got a 1.5 inch frame that I can build. After I know I got the 1.5 inch frame, I'm going to start measuring to make sure a motor will fit between there that I'm going to be using. Make sure that my rear end is going to fit underneath there. when you do your C-notch, if you want it to lay completely out, of course, your axle has to fit in there. So make sure when you build that notch, you're not just building it going, that looks good, but actually take some measurements. With the frame laying flat on the ground, that C-notch should be high enough to clear the rear axle. Okay, so move on to the next part of the video. Alright guys, so just to illustrate how to bend it, like I said, showed you a minute ago, the frame rail is already bent, but I'm going to bend the piece just to show you it doesn't require any special tools or anything like that. I'm using a scrap piece that's actually a little smaller than I use, but it's the same principle here. Still on a cell phone, but you might see in the corner over here my makeshift cracker jack or cracker box tripod to hold my cell phone up. So let's try this on camera. Like I said, it doesn't take much heat, and I'm gonna have to cut this because it is too long, obviously. So hold on, cut out of the way. Doesn't take much heat. You want to do this on a flat surface. Let's say the frame where I want it to look like this. I would just heat it up a little bit. Lay it down on the flat surface, and I can't hardly do this on camera, but bend it to the specs on your paper and give it a second to dry. You can do a little cold bending if you need to, but if you got to do any serious bends, you want to make sure that it's hot, because if you bend it cold, it will break. My suggestion, that piece I just of course heated up and got started on. Here, if you needed your bend here, you needed the bottom of your piece to be here, you would actually want to mark it somewhere right up in here to heat it up. That way when you bend it, the piece actually comes down, because if you heat it up right on the line, it'll actually end up below this line. That's really the only tip I can give you to bending it, but I'll show you. It's pretty easy to do. And don't worry if these don't stay square, because you can always work with it once you're done. To re-straighten them. Working on this camera with everything in my way, I can't really get it straight, but you get the idea. That's pretty easy to do. Alright, about to start building the cross members of the frame to hold it together. I don't actually take measurements anymore. If you don't have one of these are great. This is a little slide rule. This just slides back and forth, and I just set it to the point I need it, and that's where I cut it. This happens to be, for this purpose, I'll tell you, it's 1/8 of an inch. That's how wide I want my overall frame to be. Okay. What I'm going to do is take the two of these and get a measurement of these two sitting side by side, and I'll narrow this in the amount of this. That way, once I cut my centerpiece out and glue them to the two frame rails, it comes out to be an actual 1/8 of an inch. Right, one more thing before I glue these in. This is the most important part to build right now. When you go to glue your two cross braces in, one in the front, one in the back, do whatever you have to do to make sure this frame is square and level. Clamp it to the table, use a square, take measurements, whatever you got to do, make sure you're square and level at this point, because this is, if you get it off right here, there's no, oh well, I'll when I put this piece in, I'll straighten it back. It never works, trust me. Make sure it's square and straight. I can't say that enough times. I can't stress it enough. Make sure it's square and straight at this point. You're just going to have a heartache and a hard time ahead of you if you don't. Okay, there it is. Kind of looks like a frame now. This is a good time. You haven't done much, you've got it together. I've already checked this to make sure it's straight and square. Now I'm just going to check it to be sure that I didn't screw up on my measurements. Make sure it all fits where it needs to fit before I go any further, because if it doesn't, it's time to either start breaking things apart and redoing it, or start over altogether. Still fits, looks crooked, but it's nice, just sitting in there straight. Alright, so a good start that hasn't taken me over bending it and stuff like that, making the cuts, 45 minutes, an hour. It's not that difficult, guys. The hard part now would be building little gussets to go into corners and stuff like that, just because they're, you know, small, tedious pieces, and I want them to look good. If you don't care what they look like, just stick something in there, you're good to go. Maybe a piece of quarter round or something. I've done that before, and it looks pretty decent. I'm going to be putting in the cross braces here for my shock towers, and just rear bracing. I'll have to build in the front. I'll have to build a cross member and a transmission mount, of course, and that'll stiffen everything up pretty good. Alright, I got my rear bar in, my shock mount, and I hold my C-notch in place so the frame wouldn't warp under when you hit the airbags, because on real airbag vehicles they are bad about that. If you mount the frames to the side, before we knew to put this little cross brace in, people were getting frames that warped out as the airbags would push up on it. It was a learning experience back then, folks. Just wanted to point one thing out at this point. When I put this brace in and the one in the front, to go back, if I had been building this with a thicker frame, the only difference would have been that I would have drilled a hole straight through the side of this and into this piece, and I would have put a piece of round stock through that hole and into the other piece and glued it in place. That way it would make sure it holds in, or gets held together a little better. I would do that with this. It's just so thin that I can't do it. I've tried it before. I usually end up drilling through the side of the frame. Doesn't work out that well. Now I just got to get started on this front cross member. Alright guys, so it's time to figure out where I need the center of my cross member to be. The way I'm going to do this, I have the C-notch setting as far back as I want it to be. Well, I did have, instead a little bit. There we go. Alright. Now you're starting to tick me off. Okay. But I've got a little gap between the bed and the cab, the way I want it. C-notch is where I need it, which is all the way back. Now I wish I had some just genius technical way of telling you how to determine where the center of this center cross member is, but it's pretty low tech. I'm gonna eyeball it. The wheels are sitting in there in the center of the center wheels, and that looks centered to me. So I've got a little mark there. Remember how I was preaching about make sure it's square and level? Now I can just measure that side and put the mark in the same place on the other side of the frame, and unless I've done something wrong, it should be square. Okay, I pulled the frame out, measured the other side, marked it. There's my 2 marks. I don't know if you can see it. I can't see it, so once this video plays back, maybe you'll be able to see it. There they are. And those, you can see the mark, I think, right there. Anyway, you can see it is in line with the center of the tire there, or rim, where it would mount to your mounts on your spindles. That's it. It's time to start building the A-arms. I've already taken the frame out and measured everything, got it straight, of course, and that's what I call Santa Clausing it. I'm checking the list twice. I don't like to get started building something and halfway through go, oh man, I should have checked that a second ago. So I learned a long time ago, don't glue anything in place till you've checked it at least twice. Off camera, I'll probably check this 3 or 4 more times, trust me. But anyway, gonna get started building the cross member now. Okay guys, starting on the front cross member now. I'm going to be using the same stock that I used to make the frame. I want my cross member, if you've ever looked at a real truck, you'll notice the cross members usually come kind of just to the inside of the frame rails, which is what mine's going to do. And your lower A-arms are usually a little longer than the uppers. They'll actually come in and extend into and underneath the frame to meet that cross member. That's where they'll attach. Okay, so I'm going to cut a piece just a little bit short, or actually probably about the exact width of this frame. Then I'm going to cut 2 pieces to stick above the frame rails just a little bit, not much at all. They're going to be at an angle coming up and coming up off of this cross member. The reason I'm going to do that is if you ever look at a cross member rail one, that's the way it looks. They slope down into the lower cross member. The reason I want it to come up above a little bit is because I'll fill in a small piece on the side here, going up to it to make it look flush and like a solid piece on top. That'll be the upper A-arm mounts. Well, that's probably a lot to envision if you've never seen one, but you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. Alright, so you can kind of get an idea now of what it's going to look like. Those are probably a little too tall. I have to trim them down a little bit, no big deal. Cross member drops below the front because I've got the kick up. The cross member actually sets on the ground just like the frame. That way I've got all the room I can get for my oil pan to clear. That's the reason I dropped it down that low. Not to mention that's just the way they're built. Okay, so the next steps will be to fill in underneath here a little bit. make it look like a mount for the A-arms, and the same here on the top. The frame rails up, it'll look like one solid piece, like a mount, and the cross member will be done, and it'll be solid, and you shouldn't have any problems with it breaking. Okay guys, the frame is basically complete. You got to do all the little things now. Body mounts, building the control arms. Top control arms will mount up here. Lower control arms will mount underneath there. What else can I say? Like I said, plenty of room for oil pan there. Didn't take up much space, so headers won't be a problem. This will probably be getting, well, actually this one I'm not going to show you guys the 4-link on. I will do a video one day on another vehicle and show you how I build my 4-links. I'll try to do a parallel and a triangulated, but this one is going to be getting something a little different. It's also going to be getting a cantilever airbag type setup. So that's all going to be new to me. I've got to learn how to build it as I go. There's no reason to try to teach anybody else. That's it. You know, wasn't hard to do. Probably with the sanding, filming this, bending, gluing it together, I bet I don't have 4 hours in it. And I was taking the time out to do this video. So, not real hard to do. I've seen a lot of comments on my videos and other people's, just like I used to leave. Oh man, I didn't think, I could never do that. And then one day I tried to do it, I was like, hey, I can do that. Because it's just not that hard. So just don't be scared of it. You know, it's easy to do. If you screw one up, hey, you're out $3, $4, or $5 for some styrene. You're out a couple hours time. Let's face it, we were building model cars. We probably didn't have anything else to do anyway, right? So the time's not hurting us. I think most of us can afford $4 or $5. I know the economy's bad now, and I don't really want to lose that much money anymore either. But it's a learning experience. It's not bad. If you don't know what a custom frame should look like, there's really nothing it should look like. Your imagination's what it should look like. I like to read all the truck magazines out there. I have subscriptions to pretty much everything you can imagine since I was like 17 years old. That's where most of my ideas come from. It's the stuff I've seen in magazines that other people done and I thought looked cool. Just try to replicate that. So get out there and build, and let's see what you guys come up with. And if you find any better tips on how to build it, make sure you let me know. I hope you guys have fun with it.